Hi, and welcome to another fluid art tutorial video. In this video, I'm going to be mixing resin and hardener into my acrylic paint mixtures for fluid art. So let's get started. I have my base layer, my 4 acrylic paint mixtures in neutral colors, and I just wanted to show the whole process of mixing one of these colors. So I have my floetrol, and I'm going to mix in some black acrylic paint. I've already mixed my resin. You can see it on the side there. I do like to let it sit out for a few minutes to let some of those bubbles rise to the top. So I start by just mixing the floetrol and acrylic paint, and then I check out the consistency. It's too thick, so I'm going to have to go in and add some water. I make these acrylic paint mixtures slightly more thin than my typical mixtures when I'm adding resin, since it is quite thick. I'll be using magic resin. It's actually tabletop resin. I find it works really well for these acrylic pours. So there's the resin. It's mixed equal parts A and B, which is the resin and the hardener. And again, it is the tabletop resin. I find it is a little more thin than the regular resin and works very well when mixing in with acrylic paint. So I have 4 ounces of the resin mixture. That's 2 ounces of the resin and 2 ounces of the hardener. And I'm adding it to all mixtures, including the base layer. I don't measure it. I just try to equally add them all in, and then I mix. I'll know right away if it's too much resin. It'll be way too thick, and then I'll thin it out further with water. In the past, I have tried adding much more resin, making it a 50-50 split with the acrylic paint mixtures, and it turns into a sticky mess. It does not pour well. So I only like to add a few ounces. I don't have an exact ratio, but I have 14 ounces of mixture here and 4 ounces of the resin. And that ratio seems to work quite well. Now I'm going to mix very well to make sure that it is all mixed in there. And you can see the consistency is good for pouring, so the black is good. I've mixed all the resin in, and I'm actually going to go in and add some isopropyl alcohol, 99%. I don't normally do this, but I actually ran out of butane for my torch. That's usually how I remove bubbles. I find that alcohol can also work to remove bubbles, not as well, but since I'm out of the butane and I can't torch the bubbles, we're going to go with this method. But I would suggest if you have a torch and butane, to torch out those bubbles. It works a lot better. All right, now on to layering all of these mixtures for the pour. I have my 5 acrylic paint mixtures with the resin. They're ready to go. And then I have the base layer. I won't be layering that. I use that to pour on the canvas. This palette is all neutral colors, so I'm not worried about layering any particular 2 on top of each other and getting some ugly mix of colors. So I can really layer any which way for these 5 colors. Now, these mixtures are a little more thick than I usually have with just my floetrol mixtures. But with the resin, I find if it's a bit more thick, it's not a problem. It doesn't crack when it dries, and you're left with this really nice semi-gloss finish. I've tried these acrylic paint resin mixtures quite a few times, and the biggest thing I've learned is the amount of resin you add in makes a huge difference. If you add too much, it does not cure and it does not pour well. It is a sticky mess, especially when mixed with the whites. Anything that has a lot of white in it is harder to mix the resin in. So again, I only used 4 ounces of the resin mixture for 14 ounces of the acrylic paint mixture. And that ratio seems to work really well. You're not going to get a super glossy finish like you would with a full resin pour or a resin top coat. You'll see at the end it is a nice semi-gloss sort of finish, and I really love it. I started these acrylic paint resin mixture experiments because I have such trouble with resin top coats over canvas. So I thought, why not try to mix it directly in and see if I can get a finish that doesn't require that top coat. It took a few tries figuring out that ratio, but now that I have it, I love mixing resin directly in with my acrylic paint mixtures. All right, so now let's get to pouring. We're gonna start out with the base layer. This does have the resin mixture in. All of the acrylic paint mixtures do. So I'm just pouring it on this canvas. It is a 12 by 12 square canvas. It's propped up on cups. And I'm just gonna roughly spread it across the canvas. I've showed this in previous videos. Doesn't need to be perfect. I just need to cover most of the canvas so the rest of the colors have something to glide over. And I really wish I had my working torch here. It makes such a difference being able to just torch out those bubbles. But of course, I decided to do the video when I had no access to the torch. So we're just gonna have to deal and hope that that isopropyl alcohol will pop some of those bubbles for us. So that should just about do it for the base layer. You can see a few bubbles, and that's going to drive me crazy, but there's nothing we can do, so let's get to pouring. For this pour, I'm going to do a nice and simple line pour, right down the middle, and then spread it across the canvas. So nothing too fancy here, just a good old line pour. But I actually love the simplicity of it. These are the types that I find I usually end up wanting to put on my wall. I'm just going back and forth, right down the middle. And you can already see with the resin, you do get a slightly more grainy look, especially in those lighter white colors. That is an effect of adding the resin in, and I really like it. It becomes a much more natural looking finish. I do a lot of pours, so I get bored of seeing the same types of lines. So I love to experiment with different mediums and see what it creates. It's part of the fun with fluid art. You really never know what you're gonna get. So now I'm just gonna pour this mixture all over the canvas, corner by corner. It's spreading really well. And again, if I had used more resin, it would not be spreading like this. It's a sticky mess. So that ratio is the most important thing when adding resin into your acrylic paint mixtures. And because the mixture is slightly more thick than I would normally use with fluid art, it does take a little bit longer to pour. I have it on quite an angle here. And you can see it's going so slowly. But a benefit of that is I have control over how the lines look. And with that gray there, you can already see that nice grainy texture that I love with the resin pours. And again, surprise, surprise, I got distracted and forgot to put the canvas on camera. There we go. We're down to our last corner. And it is moving extremely slow. You can see the benefit of the base layer there. It is really helping glide over that corner without warping the shape of the lines. So let's just get it over this last corner here. And again, it's taking forever, but it's moving. We'll get there. This part requires a little bit of patience. Once I have this last corner covered, this is normally where I would go in and torch all those bubbles out. Can't do that today, but that is a pretty important step, so I probably should have waited for the butane to make this resin video. I will definitely be making another one in the future, showing the difference that torching those bubbles makes. Here is the freshly poured piece. It's not going to dry glossy like this. If you wanted that gloss, you have to put a resin top coat. It can be a lot more time consuming and frustrating, but I have learned a few tricks about that. And I will be posting a video of all that I've learned to pour a resin top coat over canvas. But for now, here we have it. Let's take a look when it's dry. Here we go. So that resin has helped those colors stay nice and vibrant. And you can see the subtle gloss to it. The resin also helps create this almost grainy-like texture that you see. The lines are still quite defined. I've really learned to love this resin mixture final look. Only problem here is the bubbles you can see, especially in the lighter beige area. That's because I didn't have my torch. But other than that, here we have it, our final dried piece. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.